St. John's Cathedral. And this is our weekly Dean's Forum. It's the beginning of our, what you could call our spring semester. Although we're not an academic community, we do tend to plan things in terms of fall and spring. So it's the beginning of this semester, so to speak. And it's also the beginning of a 3-week series on justice and homelessness, where we will host 3 consecutive guests with expertise and who work closely and partner closely with people who are either homeless or searching for direct services, or who are thinking about those themes academically. So it's an important series. The way to pay attention to what's upcoming in the Dean's Forum or for all of our programs is to go to our homepage, sjcathedral.org, and pay attention to the calendar function that's on the front page of the homepage. You can sync it right into your device. But again, welcome, Jim Boberschmidt, and welcome to everyone. Before I say an opening prayer and Jim and I dive in, I want to let you know that however you are following this morning, we would love to have your questions or comments. So if you're on Facebook Live or wherever you are, just throw in make a comment or a question, however you do that. And our communications director, our formation director, will flag that and put it in the chat for me so that Jim and I can get to it. Jim and I really enjoy other people's questions and comments even more than our own. So please do that. Jim, I'm thinking that this would be a good time to begin with a prayer for all of our communities, for our country in a time of conflict. And although I'm often enjoy praying and making up prayers on the spot, I'm going to pray one from the Book of Common Prayer that's titled "In Times of Conflict" because it feels most appropriate. Let us pray. Oh God, you have bound us together in a common life. Help us in the midst of our struggles for justice and truth in this country, to confront one another without hatred or bitterness, and to work together with mutual forbearance and respect. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Jim, before we talk about the work of St. Francis Center, and especially your work and how you and I have collaborated in the last few years, I would like to just begin by noting that one of your shelters is on Curtis Street here in Denver. And I'm curious, with the week that we've had throughout the country, in Washington, of course, but also at the Capitol here in Denver, how did you as an outreach worker, how did the week look for you? What did you see from Curtis or in your travels this week? Did the events affect you?
I guess I would just start off by saying when situations feel like they're unsafe and whatnot, our team will definitely try to steer clear of those. In some ways, since the racial justice protests that started back in May and June, our team has engaged with many levels of protesters and civic unrest, and have definitely felt a level of unsafety with the growing large encampments that evolved from that and COVID. So although this specific week we didn't necessarily see, I guess, thankfully in our local area, not active display of violence or threats of violence. Definitely, we've experienced it this year like no other.
Sure. Thank you for that. Tell us, Jim, a lot of people at St. John's Cathedral are very aware of St. Francis Center, your incredible services. We've had a partnership that literally dates from the beginning. One of your founders, God rest his soul, was Bert Womack, a great priest of the diocese and interim dean here at St. John's. So most of our people are probably pretty aware of St. Francis Center. But just in case someone's not, or someone needs to refresh their memory, give us a sketch of all that St. Francis Center does.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I think even our 501 or 503C charter is under the Episcopal Diocese of Colorado. So no doubt we've had a longstanding relationship. Um, St. Francis Center was founded as a daytime drop-in center to meet the growing need of a safe space for people experiencing homeless to be during the daytime hours. Our main agency is located at 2323 Curtis Street, open 7 days a week, 10 hours a day. In non-COVID times, we were seeing up to 800 individuals through the door every day. And, offering people a place to receive mail, a place to make a phone call and receive phone messages, a place to shower, a clothing store people can shop in, with a variety of storage for people to store their own belongings in a safe, secure place, along with a lot of other sort of wraparound supports, both within the agency and within the community. Different groups like Stout Street Clinic, Denver Human Services, the VA, substance treatment program providers all come in to the center to help support all those community members coming through the door. So that's the main thrust of what we are. Additionally, we have an employment services office. Was previously located at 14th and Gilpin, has moved one block away at 14th and Williams at the Althea Center. Their focus is working with hard to employ individuals. Some of the city grants we see focus on like helping ex-offenders get jobs and support them in the housing process. Additionally, housing is a piece that has grown out of St. Francis Center. Your community is well aware of that and have graciously helped support the creation of 49 units of permanent housing for formerly homeless community members at St. Francis Apartments. In addition to those units, we have another 70 units of housing in the community, and then are in the process of building another one at 14th and Gilpin at the former Warren Methodist Church, hoping to September this year that'll be opening about 48 units of workforce type housing. So to go hand in hand with our employment services. Finally, I work on our street outreach team. We are a 6-person outreach team that is part of what's called the Denver Street Outreach Collaborative, which is a 3-agency partnership. Our agency, Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, and Urban Peak, that's funded by the city. Approximately 16 to 18 outreach workers in total that go outside and engage, community members wherever they're at. And in a year like this, it's, as you can imagine, it's been quite eye-opening and nothing like we've ever seen before. So those 4 areas are day center, employment services, housing, and street outreach is what makes St. Francis Center.
It's an incredible operation. And one of the things that I'll return to at the end of our conversation is how to volunteer, because I also think you have an incredible team atmosphere. There's just wonderful collaboration between people who work full-time or part-time at St. Francis Center and the incredible numbers of people who volunteer there. There's just a great spirit or culture at St. Francis Center. So it's a wonderful place to serve. And we'll return to that at the end of our conversation, just in case there's someone listening who would like to get more involved. Say just a little bit more about your position and what do you do day to day? I know a lot about what you do, but say for our people, tell us how you spend your time Monday through Friday.
Yeah, well, I supervise our 6-person outreach team, but when I can just speak from the maybe street outreach perspective, it's quite unlike any other position you might hold. because your job is to go outside and build relationships with community members where they're at. I mean, I think foundationally, trying to honor the dignity of a human being that stays outside is the core of what we do in street outreach. It's truly privileged and humbling work to kind of meet the person where they're at, and from there, we're trying to invite them back into community, however that may look. That could be helping them get their ID. It could be helping them get benefits. It could be trying to connect them to medical or mental health care, trying to find any legal issues that need resolution. Ultimately, we're trying to invite them back into housing. But as we know in Denver, the affordable housing market cannot meet the great need that exists. So a street outreach worker is spending about half of their time outside. And I would say in our team, we're focused. We go all over Denver, but a lot of our focus is near the downtown, Capitol Hill areas, Rhino District, Curtis Park, where a majority of unsheltered folks are engaged. We bring socks, gloves, hats, hand warmers. I think
masks.
Say that again.
Masks.
Oh yeah. Well, that too. Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a fair point. During this COVID time, the one thing we've been, thankfully, outreach workers working outside, I think the risk of exposure is definitely have been less. And but definitely we're masked up and we're passing out masks to folks as well. There's street medicine team with the coalition, South Street Clinic that we partner with and help engage people at the camps where they're at. We've participated in a number of COVID testing camps where your church gratefully allowed Denver Health personnel set up testing. So street outreach is, and you kind of never know what the day brings, I would just say, just based on the needs of the people that show up at any time. So it's for people that somewhat enjoy chaos and just kind of being also independently motivated to serve. So
yeah. Well, I want to connect the dots on a few of the things you've already mentioned and put a lot of color to your work. So you and I met first. I remember it vividly. So you mentioned St. Francis Apartments at Cathedral Square. So that's that 49-unit apartment complex that the cathedral opened a couple of years ago. It's on the grounds of St. John's Cathedral. We have a wonderful team of people who volunteer there who are overseen by a parishioner named Fran Trujillo. I'll return to Fran again at the end in case people are curious about volunteering. But you and I were both at St. Francis Center because I was participating in a burial service of a resident who had died recently. You were there because you knew that resident. And at the reception afterward, we struck up a conversation. Jim, I didn't look back to see the exact date, but it was at some point last year. And I remember it vividly because we were beginning to see at the cathedral more and more people who were homeless and camping on the grounds or across the street from us on the corner. And it was just getting more complex and more interesting. So I picked your brain to see if you had any advice for me. And we struck up a good conversation and stayed in touch from that. And then in terms of timeline, what happened that a lot of our parishioners will remember, over winter of last year, the people camping around the cathedral, not necessarily on our sidewalk, but a few, started to grow. And then what happened is sometime around March, the city of Denver broke up the large encampment across the street from the Capitol. And almost the moment that happened, you'll remember, the encampment at the cathedral grew exponentially. And within a few weeks' time, went from a few dozen to at the very end of the process, at the end of the encampment that we had, your team counted that we were up to 104 persons camping literally on the block around St. John's Cathedral. So 104 people, which was just incredible. And the first thing I want to say is I cannot thank you and your team enough, not only for the services that you provided for the people who were here, whether masks or COVID testing or a quick path to an indoor shelter. I mean, it was remarkable the amount of site visits that your team made, your compassion, your skill. I also want to thank you just for your wisdom. You were a great sounding board for me to give me advice, and especially as that encampment here at the cathedral grew and became so large, you were just an incredible resource for me. So thank you. Yeah. What do you remember about those months, especially in relationship to what was going on at the cathedral? What was that experience like for you?
Well, yeah, I mean, clearly, I've been doing this work for 16 years, so I've been around a while, and have been know the Capitol Hill area has a long history of community members experiencing homelessness. And never in all our years of doing that have we collectively in outreach to do this work had never felt like so overwhelmed as we did with the advent of these large encampments. I mean, historically, folks might partner up, or there might, could be up to, 5 or 10 people was a large encampment.
Right.
But then, yeah, this year for that was, even a year ago, you would never see stuff like that. There might be one large encampment, but right. but something like this was quite something that we had never seen. I would also say that the experience of it was, it was, it's kind of the first time where you felt your safety somewhat at risk. And I know that your community did such a nice job. I think you offered trash service there. I mean, which was really a generous act on your community's part. And whereas it might have gone well at first, I think what we've learned in some of these large encampments is there is a lot of, I guess, illicit activity. Whereas there are people that are really needing supports, there are other people that were also, dealing in substances misuse. And we actually ran in one of the, it wasn't at your camp, but your camp ended up at Maury, which ended up near 14th and Logan. And after kind of talking to police about this, we learned that there were some real unsafe practices going on. Examples of drug dealing. There was actually some human trafficking happening in those situations. So it really was. It really was a scary time to do that. On the same token, we ran into community members on your block. I can remember there was a 66-year-old woman who couldn't move out of her tent. We were able to kind of help assist her into one of the protective action motels that the city had set up. There was another gentleman, I think he was 68. Yeah. The campers around him, they thought he might have passed. They said he smelled like he had died. Mm-hmm. And we had, our team, along with first responders and others, helped to get him out of that situation. And he is still currently in the motel. A couple of other campers too, are now in the safe outdoor space that we'll probably talk about shortly. So there definitely have been some outcomes that have resulted as a result of that large encampment on your property.
Yeah, and thank you for all of that. I would summarize it as saying, when you think about why, especially once we knew that there at a point we knew that there was available indoor shelter when the city opened the new facility. And I had to do a lot of thinking about, and conversations with you and conversations with some of the campers. I learned a lot about why people don't want to go into indoor shelters. And although there are a lot of negative reasons, and you've named some of them, there are also some, we could say, positive reasons. Would you sketch that? Why some people just do not want to move indoors? Part of it was the rumors around COVID, actually, indoors, but there were other reasons as well.
Sure. I mean, there's definitely a lot of reasons, right? As many individuals there as there are. I think fear it drives a lot of it.
Yeah.
People that have experienced traumas in their lives have difficulty maybe living in a group setting, or don't feel safe with other people's watching them sleep, that kind of thing. There's definitely people feel for their own personal safety, as well as their belongings being taken. In these large settings, we constantly hear about people's wallets being stolen or their phone being taken.
Right.
These shelters too. I mean, there have been fights and whatnot, so there is legitimate concerns for people's safety sometimes. I think you mentioned the COVID. People use health reasons like bed bugs,
Right.
in distance, getting body lice, and I do think there's elements of truth depending on where they've been at in the past. Additionally, the city doesn't really have a setup for couples, so couples wishing to stay together are going to choose to stay outside versus splitting up. Also, people with pets that feel attached to their support animals. While they can get into some shelter settings, they can't get into all of them, and can decide that they would rather stay with their pet. I think a final reason might be just like the structure of a emergency shelter setup. People that have had regimented lives, like being in jail or maybe being in the military, just don't like all the rules and regulations that you have to abide by each night. One community member told me that he waits in line an average of 12 times a night in the shelter setting, between waiting for the bus, waiting in line to get into the shelter, waiting in line to eat, waiting in line to go to the bathroom. And so it isn't necessarily person-centered that way. So
Right.
some of the reasons why, people choose not to go to the indoors.
Very helpful. Tell us about, before we talk about how the safe outdoor shelters are going in Denver currently, tell us a little bit about that as a model, where it comes from.
Yeah, I think, well, I think the first thing I would say is that, our emergency overnight shelter was never meant to be kind of a permanent housing solution. And I think in some ways that's what it's become. Especially with the exodus of affordable housing here in Denver over the past 10 years. When I started this work 16 years ago, I was hired to work overnight at St. Francis Center as a response to the community need for more space, more shelter spaces. Once And my boss, Tom Lures, I think he could tell you stories about being in committees wanting to build what they called tent cities back then.
Right.
So there's been a long history, or a desire, to create sort of outdoor sanctioned camping. I think what happened that between the racial justice protest and COVID, I think the mayor finally decided that trying a safe outdoor space model would be, on a temporary basis, of course, would be a good thing to try. So I think this safe outdoor space model is an alternative kind of living arrangement. It's not meant to be a permanent solution, but more to be a stepping stone to helping someone transition out of their homeless situation.
And we can imagine that a lot of people that you sketch the rationale for why someone would resist going to indoors, that there is appeal for these safe outdoor shelters. Currently, there are 2 that are open. Am I correct, Jim? Tell us where they are and how they're going.
Yeah, for sure. They there's a location at 16th and Pearl next to the Denver Community Church that is run by an agency called the Colorado Village Collaborative. And then another one next to the First Baptist Church at 14th and Grant, run by Earthlinks. The one on Grant Street is for female community members or people that identify as female only. There's 22 tent structures there. The other camp at Grant is open to single men and women and couples, and they have 30 tent structures there. In terms of the supports that they have, they're ice fishing tents. And they have some electricity and like electric blankets in them. I think they're private spaces. There's some larger tents on the compound itself that people have where they can access food that's provided there. There's some heating lamps in there, and it's set up in a socially distant way. A couple of the other things that really, set it apart from other camping arrangements is that there's bathrooms on site.
Right.
There's trash service available for people. There's a shower and laundry truck that's shared between the 2 sites back and forth. Additionally, there's some wraparound supports like the public library is sending technology help there to help people connect to services, jobs, whatnot. Peer navigators from the library are going to help there to support people where they're at. They're bringing in mental health care. And then our outreach teams too will go in there and try to, navigate whatever it is that they wish to try to work on.
So it seems that you're also saying that it's going well so far.
Yeah. I think so far, so good. Yes. There have been a few people that have transitioned out of them already for varying reasons. But I think, like, metaphorically speaking, the overwhelming feedback is that it's been a place where people can let go of their burdens. And by that, the burden of having to carry your belongings with you all day, the burden of having to go to the bathroom and wondering where you can go to the bathroom, the burden of, like, being able to not have to keep one eye open at night, sleeping where you're at. So I think in some ways, just the fact that people can kind of just be and not be bothered, I think has really been a positive so far.
I'm glad you mentioned, Jim, about belongings, because I think that it's something just with a little imagination. You can see when we see homeless people who are homeless on the streets, you often see them with a cart or carrying belongings. And there's certainly, I learned, fear about going into a shelter because you might have to lose those or leave those belongings behind. Also, just with a little bit of imagination, we can imagine how hard that is to travel around with your stuff. And so I'm just really, that's wonderful that at a safe outdoor shelter and SOS, you can keep your belongings and know that they're safe, and then travel about as you need to do that.
And if folks have been I think they've really commented on that. And we knew, and I would say our outreach team knows a lot of the community members at these locations, and we can already see, like, they, the fact that they're able to shower and maybe change clothes. I mean, you can already see kind of a difference in their appearance, and almost a lighter step, going around taking care of the things that they can now focus on that they were never in position to do before.
Let's ask you to look ahead and be a visionary or a prophet, which is always hard to do. But what do you've talked about how incredible this year has been. You've seen numbers at the cathedral and at other places that you've never seen in your decades of doing this work. What do you foresee in the next few years for Denver in terms of people who are camping, the SOS, the safe outdoor shelters and indoor shelters? What do you foresee and even predict?
Well, I think, I mean, I don't want to, I think one thing I never expected to do was to like see a future in this work. And unfortunately, after so many years, it just feels like our work is a growing industry, unfortunately. And I think in light of these times too, I think there's predictions of an increase still amongst what's already there, given the economy and COVID right now. The distance of going from having a job in a place to losing it, losing a job, and then shortly later losing your place just seems to be where things are headed. You know, the eviction, there's an eviction moratorium that's set to expire at the end of January. So unfortunately, I think we see, worse times ahead before things maybe will get better. The flip side is, the city is doing some positive things. They have, I think they've committed $15 million annually to a kind of a housing building fund. The state has built, I think the same amount, 15 million annually towards like a housing trust / building fund, all dedicated to people experiencing homelessness. There's some encouragement there. The passage of that Amendment 2B,
very important.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there clearly, there is some effort and political will being put forth. Unfortunately, we still see quite a lag in the affordable housing. So, ideally, we are hopeful like safe outdoor spaces will be a model that we can continue. These are only temporary. The two locations previously mentioned only have agreements through May of this year. They're hoping that they can relocate them. We are excited. Our agency is excited to help stand up a third SOS location, and we're hoping to do that in this Q1 2021. I'm hoping by early March. We don't have the site located, but we're hoping that we too, our agency, will be part of this SOS model and can leverage all the resources that already exist within our agency. So we've also expanded our outreach team. The city has funded strategic outreach to large encampments, also called SOUL. And so this is going to be a 5-person team amongst the Denver Street Outreach Collaborative agencies to help better maybe direct resources in the moment to these large encampments before they're asked to move along. So, I do feel hopeful about the work that we do, and certainly rely on the generosity and support of communities like yours to help make a difference in it.
Absolutely. And that's a good opportunity to point out that we are financial supporters of St. Francis Center annually. You're also a grantee of St. John's Cathedral, and we want to do all we can to support your work financially and in terms of volunteering. Before we end by talking about volunteering, I'm just so impressed with your mind. You're an analytical soul who thinks in terms of structures and connections and partnerships. I also deeply appreciate how you are not you're not naive, and I learned that about you early on. You would say things to me like, don't be naive. You're able to do A and B, but I don't think you're going to get to C and D. You'll compromise all that you're trying to do if you stretch too far. So I just appreciate, God bless your mind. God has granted you a great brain with which to think about all of this, and we need strategies, and we need partnerships, and I think you do that brilliantly. But you've also got heart and soul. So Jim, tell us, as we begin to end here, why is your heart in this very powerful and tender work?
Well, thank you for the kind words. It's kind of a loaded question, but I would just say on my own personal journey, I think I grew up in a Catholic household, the youngest of 10 children. So I think, care and love of your neighbor was kind of innate within me. Before I got into this work, I was teaching at a high school here, a Christian high school here in Denver, and I just felt a call to walk the walk more, right? And I think for those of us with a faith lens, I always hearken to Matthew chapter 25, the last judgment scenario that, when was it that we saw you hungry or thirsty or naked or homeless? And it's kind of like what, and so for me personally, I've always resonated being on the kind of resonating with the margins, people on the margins, how they ended up there, and to recognizing the dignity in each and every person. And I couldn't see myself achieving success, however that might look in this world, when my neighbor is sleeping outside. So I know personally, I think that's what started me into this work. I think one thing that really encourages me to keep moving forward is the collaborations that I've made over the years, both individually with the different agencies, but also with the different faith communities. And I think feeling the alignment when we talk about our agencies having a quite a historical relationship, I think a lot of the compassion, the care, the dignity in the individual is something both of our agencies have always done, and working alongside with communities like yours, keeps me going in this work. And I just really would like to take this moment just to commend your community. Like, in all the years I've been doing street outreach up in Capitol Hill, St. John's has always been kind of a beacon, a harbor for those experiencing homelessness. And I know that the staff must have taken on a lot of that care of the individual to allow people to use your space. I know Tom Lewis talked about you being an emergency shelter long ago. You guys have a long-standing history with Women's Homeless Initiative, and continue to serve that way. And I see no greater gesture than you helping create, using your property to create permanent housing for people experiencing homelessness. And it was 3 years ago this month that St. Francis Apartments at Cathedral Square opened up. So I just think we're grateful. I know we as an agency are grateful for your partnership, and look forward to continuing to work hand in hand in this community.
Well, thank you for those kind words. That means a lot, especially coming from you, and do know that the feeling is mutual. I just personally, and I know I can speak for our vestry and for Faith in Action, which is our commission that advocates for people who are homeless. We all love St. Francis Center, and could not do the small, humble things that we are doing without you. So thank you too. In terms of if anyone is listening would like to get more involved, I know there are opportunities at the shelter. There may be opportunities with Jim and the street outreach, and I'm certain that there are opportunities with the St. Francis Apartments at Cathedral Square. We have things that go on monthly there. If anyone's listening and is interested in any of those options, if you will just simply send me an email or call me, and we can have a conversation and figure out what your gifts are and what might be the best fit. And then I'll link you with the appropriate person. But Jim and his team would love more volunteers, and it's an incredible culture and an incredible place to serve. So don't hesitate to send me an email for that. Jim, thank you so much for your time as well. God bless you and your work. God bless St. Francis Center, and we look forward to working more and more with you in the coming months and what promises to be a long, hard winter for people who are in search of home and community. For all who are joining us, if you would like to join us for our 10 a.m. service of Holy Eucharist, that will begin at 10 a.m. And the easiest way to join us for that is to go to our website, our homepage of our website, sjcathedral.org. Thank you, Jim, again, and God bless you and all. Take care.